Welcome to Midnight Archives, where history's darkest secrets, unsolved mysteries, and forgotten truths come to life. Hit subscribe, and step into the shadows. Thanks for watching. In the quiet dawn of January 15, 1947, Los Angeles was already stirring to life. A light fog hung over the city's endless grid of palm-lined streets. On a vacant lot at the edge of Leimert Park, a mother walking with her 3-year-old daughter paused. She saw what she believed was a mannequin, pale, discarded, grotesquely posed. But as she stepped closer, a scream broke the morning silence. It wasn't a mannequin. It was a young woman's body, severed in two, mutilated beyond belief. She had been drained of blood, washed clean, and arranged with chilling precision. The victim was identified as 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. She would become known to the world as the Black Dahlia, a name drawn from her striking appearance, jet black hair, porcelain skin, dark clothing, and perhaps the popular film noir The Blue Dahlia, released just the year before. Her murder would become one of the most gruesome and puzzling unsolved cases in American history, igniting a media firestorm and embedding itself deep into Los Angeles lore. Elizabeth had come to Hollywood chasing the same dream as thousands of others, to become a star. Born in Boston and raised in Massachusetts, she had a complicated childhood. Her father abandoned the family, faking his suicide, only to resurface years later. Elizabeth spent time in Florida, then moved to California, bouncing between cities and living in rented rooms, occasionally working as a waitress or clerk, occasionally relying on the kindness of acquaintances and admirers. She wasn't a Hollywood insider, but she carried herself like one, glamorous, poised, always dressed to impress. Her striking beauty attracted attention, especially from men. She moved in the orbit of military men, nightclub regulars, and low-level Hollywood players. But behind her allure was a life marked by instability, no steady job, no real support, and no fixed address. The last confirmed sighting of Elizabeth was on January 9, 1947. She had been staying at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, seen using the lobby telephone. She was reportedly meeting a man, possibly for a date or a job prospect. After that, she vanished. For 6 days, no one knew where she was, until her body was found in that empty lot. Her body was cut clean in half at the waist, with surgical precision. The killer had drained her blood, scrubbed her skin, and posed her in a theatrical display, arms raised over her head, legs spread, with gruesome cuts carved into her cheeks, what's known as a Glasgow smile. Her intestines had been tucked beneath her lower back. A piece of her flesh had been removed. Her mouth was mutilated, creating a permanent grin. It was sadism mixed with showmanship. This wasn't just murder. It was a performance. And the audience was the city of Los Angeles. News of the murder spread like wildfire. The Los Angeles Herald-Express ran the headline "Murder Victim Identified as Hollywood Beauty," splashing Elizabeth's name and face across the front page. Other newspapers followed suit, diving headfirst into sensationalism. The press nicknamed her the Black Dahlia, and suddenly, Elizabeth Short was famous, not for her talent, but for her tragic death. Reporters uncovered old glamour photos and tracked down former boyfriends and acquaintances. They painted a picture of Elizabeth as a mysterious femme fatale, a girl who lived fast, dressed well, and drifted through the fringes of Hollywood nightlife. But much of that image was a fiction crafted for headlines. Friends described her as quiet, sweet, and a bit naive. She struggled with money, with housing, with loneliness. She wasn't the seductive temptress the papers made her out to be. She was a 22-year-old trying to find her place in a world that didn't have much space for dreamers without connections. Meanwhile, police launched what would become one of the largest investigations in LA history. Hundreds of officers were assigned to the case. Over 150 suspects were interviewed. Tips flooded in from the public, tabloids, and self-proclaimed psychics. But the leads went nowhere. The case became a media circus, with journalists even tainting the crime scene and impersonating police to get inside information. Then came the first chilling twist. On January 24, just over a week after the murder, the Los Angeles Examiner received a mysterious package. Inside was Elizabeth Short's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and an address book, all neatly arranged and clean with gasoline to erase fingerprints. The sender included a note: "Here are Dahlia's belongings." It was signed, simply, "The Black Dahlia Avenger." The contents were confirmed to be hers. It was a brazen taunt, suggesting that the killer was not only watching the coverage but actively enjoying it. The police now believed the murderer wanted attention, and had no fear of being caught. They brought in pathologists, surgeons, and even military doctors to analyze the cuts. The severing of her body at the lumbar spine required anatomical knowledge and confidence. Whoever did this likely had medical training, or at least a strong familiarity with human anatomy. Several suspects emerged. One was Robert Red Manley, the last man known to have seen Elizabeth alive. He had driven her from San Diego to Los Angeles and left her at the Biltmore Hotel. Manley was questioned, given 2 lie detector tests, and held in custody for days. But he passed both tests and had an alibi. He was eventually cleared. Another was Mark Hansen, a wealthy nightclub owner whose address book was found among Elizabeth's belongings. He admitted she stayed at his home on occasion, but he denied involvement. Still, many suspected he knew more than he let on. Then there was Dr. George Hodel, a name that wouldn't come to the forefront until decades later, but one that would become perhaps the most notorious suspect of all. Dr. George Hodel wasn't just any suspect, he was a wealthy, eccentric physician with a mansion in Hollywood and a long history of disturbing behavior. In 1949, just 2 years after Elizabeth Short's murder, Hodel's name entered the investigation due to suspicions of sexual abuse involving his own daughter, Tamar. The charges were horrifying, and though he was ultimately acquitted, the details painted a portrait of a man with a sinister edge and little moral restraint. What made Hodel a serious Black Dahlia suspect were a few chilling connections. First, he had been a practicing surgeon, perfectly capable of the kind of precise body bisection performed on Elizabeth Short. Second, during a wiretap operation set up by the LAPD in 1950 to catch him on incest charges, investigators recorded him saying, "Supposin' I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." The implication was unmistakable, and eerily specific. The audio was never followed up with formal charges. Hodel fled the country shortly after and spent the next few decades living abroad in the Philippines. He died in 1999. But the most explosive accusations came after his death, when his own son, Steve Hodel, a retired LAPD homicide detective, began digging into his father's life. Steve Hodel published a book, Black Dahlia Avenger, in which he laid out a detailed and deeply researched case against his father. He cited photos he claimed were of Elizabeth Short found among his father's belongings. He also connected Hodel's circle of artistic and surrealist friends, like Man Ray and John Huston, to imagery found in Elizabeth's posed body. Some of the crime scene's grotesque elements mirrored Man Ray's surrealist photography, leading Steve to believe the murder had been some kind of performative statement. Critics of Steve Hodel argue that his evidence is circumstantial and his theory self-serving. But his investigation reignited public interest and added another layer of intrigue to an already mystifying case. Still, Hodel was just one of over a dozen serious suspects. There was Leslie Dillon, a bellhop and aspiring crime writer, who seemed to know too much about the crime during an interview with police. He offered up a theory about a friend being the killer, but his descriptions of the mutilation were so specific it alarmed investigators. He later claimed he was coerced into confessing under duress and was released. Then there was Walter Bailey, a respected surgeon who lived near where Elizabeth's body was found. Some amateur sleuths believe he had a personal motive. His daughter had been friends with one of Elizabeth's sisters, and he may have harbored a hidden obsession. But he died before ever being questioned. And yet, despite the parade of suspects, the mountain of interviews, and the decades of speculation, the case remains unsolved. What sets the Black Dahlia case apart from other murders is its haunting convergence of horror, celebrity, and conspiracy. Elizabeth Short became a posthumous icon of noir tragedy, her life consumed and defined by the circumstances of her death. She was turned into a character, a symbol, and a canvas for a nation obsessed with the dark underbelly of glamour and ambition. Hollywood itself became complicit in the myth. Dozens of films, books, and TV shows have drawn inspiration from her story, L.A. Confidential, American Horror Story, and James Ellroy's novel The Black Dahlia among them. Each retelling mixes fact with fiction, painting Elizabeth as a doomed beauty wandering through a city of masks and secrets. For the LAPD, the case has been a lasting stain. Many believe the initial investigation was botched due to media interference and police corruption. Others think it was just an impossible case, no witnesses, no murder scene, no direct evidence. In recent years, some amateur investigators have even explored DNA testing of evidence still in possession, but the results have been inconclusive or unavailable to the public. In the end, the Black Dahlia case is more than a murder, It's a mirror held up to 1940s America, a time when the divide between fame and anonymity was razor thin, and when young women could arrive in Los Angeles chasing a dream only to vanish into its shadows. Elizabeth Short wanted to be a star. Instead, she became a legend, but not in the way she had hoped. Her story, forever unfinished, remains one of the most tragic and captivating cold cases in American history. As the decades passed, the Black Dahlia case transformed from a local horror story into a cultural enigma. Elizabeth Short's death became less about solving a crime and more about grappling with the questions it left behind. Who was Elizabeth, really? A dreamer? A drifter? A victim of a predatory city? Or was she something more, a symbol of innocence exploited, of ambition twisted by darkness? In the years following her murder, her image became inescapable. The press had already given her a name, the Black Dahlia, but they also reshaped her persona. She was cast as a seductress, a woman of mystery, a good-time girl with secrets. It was a convenient narrative, one that justified the horror done to her. But the truth was simpler and sadder. She was a 22-year-old with no stable home, chasing a better life in a place that didn't care if she vanished. The LAPD eventually declared the case cold. Over 500 people had confessed to the crime at various times, some mentally ill, others looking for fame. One man walked into an LAPD station in 1950 and claimed to have killed her simply because he was tired of being unemployed. Each confession was investigated. None panned out. With no arrests and no closure, the case took on a life of its own. Conspiracy theories exploded. Some claimed the murder was part of a Hollywood sex ring cover-up. Others believed the killer was protected by powerful friends in high places. The lurid details of the crime, especially the surgical mutilation and body staging, seemed too deliberate, too theatrical, to be the work of a random killer. It felt personal. It felt ritualistic. But maybe that's what the case does best, it feeds on interpretation. Like a Rorschach test, it tells us more about who we are and what we fear than it does about the truth. Even the LAPD's own files seem to reflect this ambiguity. Over the years, various leaks and documents surfaced suggesting that evidence may have been lost, or buried. Witnesses changed their stories. Officers disagreed on theories. And the trail went colder with each passing year. In 2003, the city of Los Angeles finally installed a small memorial plaque for Elizabeth Short near the site where her body was found. It sits quietly along South Norton Avenue, easy to miss, easy to forget. But for those who know the story, it's a quiet place of mourning. Not just for Elizabeth, but for every victim whose voice was drowned out by headlines. The woman behind the myth deserves to be remembered. Elizabeth Short was born in Boston, Massachusetts in 1924. She grew up during the Great Depression, experienced abandonment when her father disappeared, and battled chronic lung issues that made her vulnerable and anxious. Her letters to family showed sweetness and longing, not scheming or promiscuity. She was hopeful, not naive. She arrived in Los Angeles like so many others, looking for a break, a role, a place to belong. What she found was something far more brutal. Her murder reminds us of how quickly someone can be consumed by the very dream they're chasing. And yet, there's one final twist to her legacy. In the years since her death, Elizabeth Short has become a symbol not of scandal, but of injustice. Her story has inspired advocacy for victim rights, criticism of media sensationalism, and deeper discussions about how we treat missing and murdered women, especially those who live on the margins. She may have been silenced in 1947, but her legacy speaks loudly now. Her killer is almost certainly dead. No confession will come. No courtroom drama awaits. But in a strange way, Elizabeth Short got what she always wanted, to be remembered. Not as the Black Dahlia, not as a crime scene photo, but as a person, flawed, hopeful, human. As long as people keep asking what happened to her, as long as the mystery still haunts the collective memory of Los Angeles and beyond, Elizabeth's voice hasn't been fully silenced. It echoes in every unsolved case. In every forgotten name. In every city where dreams and danger walk hand in hand. The Black Dahlia may remain unsolved, but she will never be forgotten.